All right, somebody tell me something that FDR did to save us from the Depression. You don't have to argue that it did, but...
He took the place of the president. He became president.
Became president. Okay, that right there was enough to save us. Okay, Joseph?
Burned a bunch of bacon.
Burned some bacon. Matthew's confused. That is good. At least he fell down the right side of this thing. All right, something else he did besides became president. Eventually. Yeah, eventually. Stephanie?
He took the dollar off the gold standard.
Okay. Your hand is raised. I thought you gave me that secret signal, like I know this one. Go ahead and pick on me.
He had farmers plow under their crops. He had farmers plow underneath their crops.
Yeah, then plow under their crops. They didn't actually plow underneath their crops. I'd like to see that. Okay, we know what you meant.
Public work increased.
Okay, public works. So, and none of this stuff addresses the problem. Okay, none of it. What was the thing that started the Depression? Just government intervention, government meddling with the economy. The government was the problem, all right, at the heart of it. Okay, we got FDR done yesterday, the New Deal, the second New Deal. The New Deal is a failure, the courts didn't like it, and then some results of the New Deal. And questions on any of that. And FDR was a communist, can't forget that. It's, I think, fairly common knowledge today, the communist ties, but it was the mid-90s, 95, 96, when the first research was done into all those Soviet documents that started to bring this information out. So I remember reading books about this new information, and we were right. You know, they really were spies. So it's not like it's that long ago. It was before you were born, but it wasn't that long ago. So. All right, let's talk about World War II. We'll do World War II, and then we'll do the Cold War. Back-to-back wars. All right, let me look up one thing here. Oh, yeah, we're good. Cold War. I've got to split up into several pieces. The first piece is background information and the start of the war. So we'll look at some things going on prior to the war, some background information, and then the event that gets this thing started. So background and start of the war. Four things here in this background section and start of the war. The first one is the rise of dictatorship. We see dictatorships. We see around the world several places where dictators take over. Anybody know one? Hopefully everybody knows one.
Germany.
Okay, with Hitler in Germany, 1934. Adolf Hitler takes over Germany, establishes the Third Reich, or however you say that, becomes the leader. So 1934, we have Hitler taking over Germany. An interesting story, if you ever want to, his rise to power and his killing off the Jews, and even before the final solution, other things they did to the Jews. Some scary parallels with Donald Trump. All right, so we have Hitler, dictatorship there, 1934. Another one. Mussolini in Italy. Oh, I thought you said Germany. It's 1922. Mussolini takes over in Italy. So we have a dictatorship in Italy.
Did you say 1922?
Yeah. Stalin in Russia. He comes in 1925. really, prior to that was Lenin, going from the October Revolution in 17, but Stalin in 25. There's a power struggle there after Lenin dies. Stalin wins the power struggle. Anybody know who the guy who loses out? Oh well, Trotsky. Might have heard of people referred to as Trotskyites, but anyway, he loses out.
The guy with the hat that's in his head.
Yes. And then the last thing is in Japan. Not officially a dictatorship, because they still had this emperor and all of that, but a philosophy takes over called militarism in 1937. It begins to it dominated there for a while, but militarism begins to dominate in Japan. The basic thought there is that the military is the solution to all of your problems. No, the military is the solution to a lot of your problems, but not all of them.
And that was Hirohito?
Yes. He was the emperor, and Tojo is one of the military leaders. So in Japan, not officially a dictatorship, but essentially that. All right, so we have these dictatorships, these crazy dictators coming to rule around the world in the years prior to this. So, all right, the second thing is military aggression. We see several places around the world where these countries primarily are very aggressive in their actions. All right, the first one to talk about is Japan invading China. We don't focus on this too much in American history because it's Japan against China. But there's a lot that takes place there. Going back into the early 30s, Japan and China start to go at it over Korea. Both wanted to control Korea, and then eventually Japan gaining control there and invading the northern parts of China. And that was about 1931. If that happens, 1937, they begin more direct assaults into mainland China. And there's some nasty atrocities, not that there's ever good atrocities, but just some really nasty things here that the Japanese do to the Chinese people. If you've read much about how they treated our soldiers, it was worse to what they did to these Chinese people, just some very, very horrendous things. But it was 1937 here when we get that attack into mainland Japan and just some nasty, nasty atrocities. Okay, so we have that one. We have Italy flexing their military might and invading Ethiopia. And I say that completely in jest. They did invade Ethiopia. Ethiopia was backwards, primitive, tribal, and Mussolini comes in with tanks and mechanized troops. It's not much of a fight, but invades Ethiopia. All right, so we have the Italian invasion of Ethiopia. All right, in Spain we have a civil war. Civil Wars from 36 to 39. And it was a civil war, but several European countries are taking sides here. Germany and Italy picked one side. Russia, the Soviet Union, picks another side in their support for this thing. So it puts people at odds, even though it was just a civil war. The next several here involve Germany. Germany begins to violate the Treaty of Versailles. Which war was ended by the Treaty of Versailles? World War I. All right, so they begin to violate that. There were restrictions on the size of their army and places that could not be militarized, and he violates both of those. The treaty said they can only have a 100,000-man army. They begin to violate that. By 35, they have 600,000 people in their army, and it just continues, and the world just watches and says nothing. They also remilitarized an area called the Rhineland. It was on the border between Germany and France and Belgium, that western side of Germany. It's an area that was supposed to not have any German military in it. The idea was it would be a buffer zone if Germany wanted to invade again. There'd be a section of land they had to cross before they got to France, so they'd have a little bit of warning. They occupy that with their military. That was in 36. All right, so those two were violations of the treaty. They do some other things that aren't necessarily direct violations of the treaty, but aren't very nice. In 38, they take over Austria. I can probably show you a map. Oh, wrong war. All right, so on this side here, Austria, occupy that. That was in 38. This was done with a lot of subversive activity. They sent agents in to undermine the government and orchestrate this overthrow. So it wasn't an invasion necessarily, but they did take over. That was 38. Then also in 38, Germany claimed part of Czechoslovakia. You can see that the next country there to the east. The particular land they claimed was called the Sudetenland. It was a part of Czechoslovakia that was peopled by a lot of German descents, people that were of German descent, the same ethnic group as Germany. So they claimed that it should be part of their country. By that argument, Mexico should have major portions of the southern parts of our country because it's occupied by lots of Mexicans. But anyway, that doesn't hold anymore, but that was the claim, that the Sudetenland should be part of Germany. So England and France helped negotiate with Germany and Czechoslovakia to give this land to Germany. Again, think you're Czechoslovakian and the major world powers come to you and say, all right, we're here to negotiate you giving away part of your country. It wasn't, they weren't going, woohoo, let's give it away. They were really backed in the corner. But anyway, England and France actually helped this. Hitler was saying this was it. This is the last peace I want. We'll have all of the German people under one leadership. I'll be satisfied. And there were some very foolish people in England and France that believed it. All right, so that was 38. They helped negotiate this. Germany takes over the Sudetenland. Then in 39, Hitler takes all of Czechoslovakia, occupies the whole thing. All right, one last piece of aggression here before we get to the piece of aggression at the start of the war. It's also in 39, Italy takes Albania over here. Mussolini occupies Albania. Okay, so we have some of these countries being very aggressive. That League of Nations that was going to, make war obsolete, and all those dumb peace pacts, banning war. Really, you very quickly here see how ludicrous those things are. It's just not humanly possible for that type of thing. So I have a lot of military aggression. A lot of things happening here. It wasn't like World War I. It didn't just happen in a vacuum. There was things prepared that pushed us to this point of war, and this wave of military aggression pushed us this direction. So, all right, the next thing is the start of the war. We're going to look here. It's another piece of military aggression, but this is the one that actually gets the war started. All right. The piece of aggression that gets the war started was on September the 1st of 39, when Germany invaded Poland. Germany invaded Poland. They use here something they are very good at and use a lot. They're blitzkrieg lightning warfare. They would storm into a country and catch the Air Force on the ground. It was just zoom in very, very quickly using tanks and things. They zoom into Poland, catch them very much off guard. September the 1st is when that invasion takes place. And September the 3rd is when France and England declare war on Germany. Okay, so there had been other things that happened. This was the final straw here that pushed us over the edge. September the 3rd. There's something else I need to mention about that invasion before we leave it.
Did the Soviets also invade Poland from the
Yeah,
inside?
they were just slow. If they'd been the first ones on the scene, they would have got credit. I really don't have a good answer for that, but I was going to bring that up. This invasion of Poland actually was a joint agreement between the Soviets and the Germans. They agreed, it was a secret compact between them, that they were going to split Poland. So when Germany invaded, it was part of a pre-orchestrated plan, and the Soviets invade from the other side.
That was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Agreement, correct?
I'm sorry?
That was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Agreement.
Well, I don't have the name of it here, but that sounds good. I know the name, but I would guess it's here, but I don't have it in front of me. So those two, they agree to occupy Poland. And they do. Germany invades, and then the Soviets invade just a little bit later. And hopefully you're thinking, what about the Soviet Union? How come they don't get the same treatment Germany did? And, yeah.
The reason they were slow was because they stopped to invade Estonia.
Well, you get preoccupied with things. But I don't have a good answer other than all the mechanism and things were already rolling against Germany. And, in the confusion of everything that's happening, it gets glossed over, and they join the side of the Allies. But they invade just like Germany. The Soviets were, they were anything but innocent throughout this war. They were on the side of the Allies, but they were very vicious and brutal. So. Okay, September the 1st, we get the war started there. The German invasion of Poland is what kicks this thing off. All right, the last thing here under this background and start is I want to list the two sides of the war a little bit. There's all kinds of countries involved here again, but the two sides, primarily the Axis powers and the Allied powers. The Axis, they're the evil guys. You can always tell who the evil guys are because they're on the other team. You're playing volleyball. If you're on the Tigers, Panthers, what were you girls on? Oh, okay. Well, if you're on the Panthers, then the Tigers were evil just because of the other team. No, I'm kidding. These guys were evil, and not just because they're on the other team. Axis powers. Germany, Italy, Japan. And then I have a host of other countries here that mostly get occupied, join that way. But there's some other countries involved here, officially on the Axis side. Austria, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Libya. Right? There's a lot of countries involved there on that side. On the map, the yellow is Axis powers, and the whatever that is, girls. What's the difference? Orange? What's wrong with her? Come on. The orange and the yellow. There's better names. Mustard yellow or golden. Girls. Can you guys please help him? Whatever the difference is, you can see the lighter yellow are the Axis powers, and the others are places that they occupied. So a lot of these countries are thrown here on the Axis side, but they really get occupied and are forced to participate that way. So the Soviet Union, even as part of it, gets occupied. They never fight on the Axis powers. But so that yellowish, orangish, goldenrod section is the Axis powers. Wow. Which one is which? Is that true?
He's homeschooled.
He's homeschooled. That does explain lots of things. In Russia.
That's even worse.
Yeah. So there's and he's Mrs. Bishop's brother, so So, all right, the other side, the Axis powers. I'm sorry, the Allies powers. Sorry, Allies. A whole bunch of people here too. I won't list them all. The main players: England, Soviet Union, us, America, France. They provided the playground for the war to take place on. France. All right, and then a host of other people were involved. I'm not trying to what's that? We're getting there. Other countries made minor contributions. No, I'm kidding. Canada really did. They filled their own units here. You have your own beach at Normandy, and you can really argue that you handled your landing better than we did. So, all right. So other countries: Canada. Nobody there. Forget that. Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Syria, Israel, China, Australia, etc. I have Israel listed there, but that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I don't know why I have that on my list. It had been part of Turkey. It would have been part of the British mandate. So in that sense, it would have participated. So anyway, very much a stretch. The point is, there's a lot of other countries that play minor roles. Canada contributes significantly. So, all right, Allied powers. All right, so that's the background to start. Gets this thing rolling. All right, next thing to talk about is the first part of the war, and I've got it labeled this way. For my outline, I have that whole section as Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then another section here for me, it fits nicely into these categories. The next section is Axis advances early in the war. We'll talk about the first part of the war and how the Axis powers do extremely well. I mean, they put a hurting on the Allies. Of course, America wasn't there, so what do you expect? It's only bragging if it's not true, right? I'm kidding. All right, so Axis advances early in the war and American neutrality. So America does start out neutral here, and we'll talk about that a little bit and how we do get sucked into this thing. All right, Axis advances. First point. Those are my 2 points. Axis advances and American neutrality, and we'll talk about how we go from that to how we get involved in the war. All right, Axis advances. It really is hard to appreciate what the Axis powers did here. They accomplished a whole lot in a short amount of time, and it's hard to appreciate the predicament England is in and the feeling that was taking place in the world here. So we'll try to do that. So, all right, first one, on October the 5th of 39, Germany and Russia, or the Soviets, divide Poland. So we have that done. The Russians kill about 10,000 Polish officers. The Germans begin setting up camps there, Treblinka and Auschwitz and others. And, atrocities begin. But October the 5th, the Poland situation is done. The invasion was September the 1st. All right, so we talked about that blitzkrieg, this very, very quick occupation. It did not take long. All right, so that was the fall of 39. There's a pause through the wintertime, and in the spring we see this renewed onslaught by the Axis powers. The next wave starts in May of 1940, and Germany heads primarily north and into Belgium and the Netherlands, heads up that way. Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, they launch an attack up that direction. The last of those countries to surrender was on the 26th. The actual attack started on the 10th, and 16 days later, Belgium was the last to surrender. Okay, so a gigantic sweep through there very, very quickly. There is a significant battle that takes place in Belgium. Anybody know about that one?
Right now, during this,
Yeah.
they take over the national line. They just go completely around it.
They go around it.
Because the French claim that the Germans can never get in through the Ardennes forest, and
So they go around it. We should let Stephanie answer any questions. I'm kidding. So, all right. Sweep through there, take away massive amounts. Anybody else want to answer that question?
So the capture of all the Belgian force using lagers?
Dunkirk?
That was in France.
But it's part of this sweep through there. I just say Belgium. So, all right. There's about 300,000 troops in this movement that get trapped against the coast, and they're able to get most of them out. The French complain that the English don't take their troops out. So, all right. So May the 10th is the point. The Germans launch to the north primarily and occupy all that by the 26th of the month. All right. This is a little bit of an arbitrary separation here. A lot of these attacks all take place at the same time, but the next place to surrender is France, and that's on June the 26th. This attack really takes place just about simultaneously. But by June the 26th, we have France under German control. France gets split into two pieces, north and southern half, the Vichy France, and a lot of Frenchmen flee the country rather than live under German control. You may know the name of a guy associated with the Free French people. Just one? Two? Where did you guys go to high school? Stephanie? Charles de Gaulle was headed up the Free Frenchmen. All right. So again, it's hard to appreciate this, but from May through June, we have the Germans sweep all through here and take all of that territory without really being contested significantly. Right? Then they turn their eyes on England In the late summer, fall of that year, they launch an attack on England that ends up failing. There's nothing at that point that made it obvious it was going to fail. I mean, Germany was on a roll here. They launch this attack on Germany that eventually fails. So let's look at a little bit of detail here. The initial attack was with the German Air Force. Their plan was to just obliterate the British Air Force so that they could have command of the skies for the across-channel invasion. If you've ever studied much about the D-Day invasion and how amazing that was, the Germans had to go the other direction. Right? So it was not an easy thing. They're trying to get rid of the British Air Force so they would not have to deal with that as they were landing. If you've ever tried to get out of a canoe and get onto land, that cumbersome stage where you're halfway, you're a little bit vulnerable. These guys didn't have magic shoes to walk on the water. They still had to deal with that clumsy stage. So that was a very vulnerable point. So they're wanting to clear the skies to allow for this landing to take place. And really the short story is they never do that. They try to blow the planes up, and that fails. And these planes are, and the pilots are just going nonstop, just about. And then they start bombing the airfields because they can't knock all the planes out of the sky. So the British scatter their planes all over the countryside, and these guys are taken off out of cornfields and down dirt roads and all kinds of things. And then Germany gives up trying to destroy the planes hidden all over the place, and just starts carpet bombing the cities. And we have London getting blasted, and just city after city getting blasted here. Germany trying to pummel them into submission. And they never succeed, never succeed. Churchill made this statement, talking about the British Air Force, which hopefully I recognize. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed to so many by so few. All right, the few hundred men there flying those planes, about 400 planes against about 2,000 planes. Those pilots held off this German attack, and it never succeeds. So we have this several months here of just nonstop German successes, and then this stop here. And it really is hard to appreciate that. I read a biography of Churchill once, and right at this point, as the Germans would turn their eyes on England, his daughter asked him, "What do I do someday if I go into the kitchen and there's a German there?" Now, just again, think of the mindset of the reality of this, that she's worried that there's going to be a German in the kitchen someday, not knocking at the door, an invasion. And I love his response, very comforting to the girls in the room. I'm sorry, the girls in the room. His response was, get a knife and take one with you. They're going to kill you. Might as well stab one of them. That was his response. But again, that little exchange at least helped me appreciate the real reality there of the Germans invading England. I mean, this was not, we look back and say, the British Air Force, they saved the day. But it was not obvious at that point that they were going to save the day. And there was some real fear of this land invasion taking place. So, how many more rabbit trails should we go down? Talk about technology and radar. Yeah. Oh, no question? Okay. All right, so we have Germany failing there to take England. All right, let's continue on. There's a couple more things here that take place. I didn't give you any real dates for that. It's several months long. It's the late summer, fall of 40 into 41 where this attack takes place, and eventually Hitler backs completely out of it. All right, a couple of things take place here. The Axis powers attack Egypt and Greece. Initially it was Italy. That didn't go so well. Germany comes down and helps them, and they take Italy. What am I saying here? Greece and parts of Egypt, parts of North Africa across here. They take General Rommel, the Desert Fox down there. All right, and then on June the 22nd of that year, so roughly a year, 2 years now completely of all of this activity, of almost unchecked German advances. We have England, the one exception. On June the 22nd of 41, Germany attacked the Soviet Union. Prior to this, they'd had that peace compact. Germany violates that and attacks the Soviet Union. And they do very well initially. You can see the occupied territory on the map, the orangish whatever, going off the map. They do very well in this initial invasion. So they run into the same trouble that other people have had when they invaded the Soviet Union.
When was this?
June the 22nd of 41, that took place. America gets in the war before that whole invasion turns around, and the Soviets begin to push them out. So we will pick that invasion up in a little bit later. There was an American news broadcaster on Sunday evening speculated on the radio that maybe we should just let the Germans and the Soviets destroy each other, and we'll just stand back and pick up the pieces. They probably should have done that, but what's that old phrase? Never stop your enemy when he's killing himself or something like that. Go ahead and let them do it. But anyway, broke their compact. The Germans invade deep into Russia. We will talk about some of the battles that take place there, but there's some massive battles out here on this front where there's millions of casualties per battle. It really is, it's mind-boggling the amount of death out there. But a story for another day. All right, so all that was Axis advances. You can see here the Germans, the Axis powers, do very well in the initial stages of this thing, taking all kinds of territory. The one exception here was their attack on England that was stopped. Okay, now let's talk about America. America being neutral. All right, the first point is that we declare neutrality. All right, and the second thing here is that we had the same forces drawing us into the war as we did in World War I. In World War I, we talked about the economic ties to the Allied powers, the shipping that's getting attacked by the Axis powers, the German U-boats at that point. We had the same things drawing us into the war on the side of the Allies in Europe. All right. Those things aren't given enough time to come to fruition. We get drawn into the war because of the attack at Pearl Harbor. But that was there. We already had that mindset of liking the English, being owed money by the English, trading with the English. All of that was already there. So we're getting pushed that way. That does not draw us into the war, but it was just a matter of time, and that would have, just like it did for World War I. So the area that we do get dragged into the war with is with Japan. And the first thing with Japan is a little bit of back and forth. We'd had some trouble with Japan prior to this, and it was building to tension. Okay, going back into the mid-30s, we had protested against their attacks in China. We talked about those in the invasions taking place there and the atrocities going there. We had protested that. We didn't, at that point at least, really get involved to stop it, but there was not good will between us at that point. Eventually, in 1939, we began to help fund some of the Chinese that are fighting against Japan. So we began sending money over there. We even began having American citizens going over to join their forces and fight against them. So about 39, we began the American government helping with money and American citizens going over to help. Anybody know the name of the guy that we went over to help? Anybody else, I should ask? Olivia has her hand up. You saw it, right? It was raised. Just make up a Chinese name. Think of a patched pirate that you heard in, Hu Flung Chow or something. Stephanie? Chiang Kai-shek. He was the... What's that? Okay. That was the guy we began to help. He was the leader of the Chinese. The communist Chinese were led by a guy named Mao Zedong. Those two groups had already been added in China when the Japanese invasion came place. So we didn't help the communist forces, we helped the free forces. So we began helping there in 39. Obviously that, if you're funding the side that's fighting against your neighbor, you're not too friends with the neighbor. And that was happening. So, all right, a few more things happen here. In the summer of 41, the attack comes in December. So that summer, by this point, we're having the Germans invading the Soviet Union, and the attack on England has failed. Summer of 41, both us and Japan lay out some demands on each other. We're not going to go through what all the demands are, but you can probably guess. Japan was saying, leave us alone in China, pull your forces out, take your people away. We were saying, stop. So laid out some demands to each other. Neither side agreeing, neither side backing down. Really, it just puts us more on this collision course that was coming. So, all right, so there had been some ongoing trouble and problems between us that boils over here, and that's my next point, Pearl Harbor. December the 7th, 41, Japanese launch a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Sunday morning. Big chunk of the American Pacific Fleet was there. The Japanese were gambling that they could do enough destruction in that attack that they would have a buffer time to run rampant around the Pacific and conquer all the places that they wanted before we could get back on our feet. You're in the locker room and some guy's messing with you, so you gamble that if you sucker punch him, you get him on the floor, you'll have enough time to do all those things you really want to do before he recovers. That was kind of Japan's thinking here. All right, it didn't work out, but that was their plan. So, all right. So December 7th, 41, surprise attack. December the 8th, we declare war on Japan. Germany and Italy repay the favor and declare war on us. So. All right. Before we leave this completely, it was a surprise attack. All right. As much as I don't like FDR. I don't think he knew this was coming and just sat around and let it happen. I do think it was a surprise attack. There are people that argue it was he knew about it, and usually the ones I've looked into, they'll go through the thousands of communications that go between our military forces, and they'll find some obscure radar operator who 3 days before said, "I know they're coming," and then they'll say, "Well, look here, FDR knew." Think of the one obscure radio operator who makes this one transmission. How would the president know? And if he did know, how many other transmissions were there saying, we don't think they're coming? So they go through and, just lost the word. I want to say henpeck, but that's the wrong word. Cherry pick the right pieces of information that fit their story and say, look, the president had to have known. We have these 3 documents that show it. And they forget about the 4,000 documents that they had to weed through that didn't show that. But they picked these out. It'd be like somebody going through your grades and picking out the 4 worst grades in the entire school year and saying, look, they're really stupid. Here's the grades to prove it. You say, wait a second. What about these grades? Right? Some of you are thinking, well, 92 is not too bad. Oh, go ahead. No. All right, so anyway, the conspiracy people that say, oh, this was coming and we knew about it, they're doing stuff like that. It really isn't fair. As much as I don't like FDR, that's not fair. Yeah.
So how do you explain the fact that all the carriers were out of harbor at the time of the attack and all the planes were facing each other?
Bad planning.
There was a regular scheduled exercises by the aircraft carriers were out, and why the planes were so close together is because the commanders on the bases thought that they were afraid of the Japanese who were on the island that they would sabotage the planes, so they put them in the middle so they could guard them.
Bad planning.
Commanders and pilots who protested that action.
Yeah, they did.
As I said, you can go through and cherry pick things like that, but it would be fair to argue maybe they made a bad choice about how to do it, but to say that this is all staged to allow the Japanese to make this death blow.
I believe he did, because based off his actions in Germany, when the German officials tried to contact him with surrender proposals, he refused to even acknowledge anything, threatening the ambassador with death if he told anybody about it.
When Germany wanted to surrender?
In 1939, a group of German officers approached the American ambassador with the proposal to assassinate Hitler, and the ambassador was sending messages to FDR, and FDR never answered a single message. And then the ambassador got a message from FDR saying, if you tell anybody about this, you will die.
Almost positive those were the aliens.
So, after they built the pyramids. So, I said there are lots of conspiracies, and I don't know the answers to all of them, but the ones I've looked into, I really don't think FDR knew the attack was coming and just let it take place. I'm not going to argue that he didn't have communist leanings and made some stupid decisions, sure, but I don't think he knew it was coming. He's dead, so we'll never really know. So, all right, maybe I shouldn't have opened the can of worms. Just left it as a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. So, all right. There's, well, enough said. So there's some people that have been to our church to preach that were there. At least one. I think there's two. I only have one written down here. George Grant. Gorgeous George. He was there. So, all right. We're in the war. Enough said. Next point. We've got two more parts of the war to talk about here. The next point is America preparing for the war and the end of the war in Europe. I've got those two smushed into the same section. We could make them separate sections if we wanted, but America preparing and the end of the war in Europe. Those two. A little bit about us getting involved in the war and then the end of the war in Europe. The last section is the war in the Pacific, which we haven't even touched. Right? We've got to talk about the whole war in the Pacific after Stephanie's computer gets... That was a premeditated attack. Stephanie knew it was coming too and let it happen. All right, America's preparation. Just a couple of things here. We have about 10 million men who get drafted into the Army and another 5 million or so who volunteer and fight. Total about 15 million. I end up fighting in this thing. Right. Second thing is that our whole industrial production gets turned towards military items. This really caught the Japanese off guard. They didn't think we could rebuild as fast as they thought. So this is a quote from our textbook. Yankee factories, must be a slam against the Southerners. Yankee factories turned out war materials at nearly unprecedented levels. 221,000 aircraft, more than 1,500 warships, doubling the entire military production of the Axis powers by 1944. All right, so massive. I don't have the numbers here, but I forget the like monthly fielding battleships or aircraft carriers. It was just amazing the speed with which we got these things out.
I think we made 16 warships to every one Japanese that was built. So that greatly helped.
It does help a whole lot when you've got 16 warships to their one. So I mean, it was. Some people talk about this being the one single deciding factor, the amount of war materials that we brought to this thing. So.
I know that every day we're producing at least one full-size cargo freighter to send to the Allied powers in Europe. So
Yeah.
there were so many ships being built, the Germans couldn't possibly kill it.
Even if, they just could not. They couldn't do it. Even if they got them all in their sights, they ran out of ammunition. So, an amazing amount of production. So that is not insignificant. It's not as exciting as talking about the guys who flew the planes, but the guys in the factories and the girls in the factories produce a lot of things. The guys in the factories, despite the girls in the factories. No, I'm kidding. All right, so production. Next thing is finances a little bit. Just like World War I, we had to at least pretend like we were going to pay for this thing. So taxes were raised. At this point, we started several things that we're still stuck with. One of them was the deduction from our paychecks for our taxes, that every paycheck having money taken out. Started at this point. The excuse was to get the money to the government quickly, rather than waiting to the end of the year and all that. It sent the money directly there, which I can see that. It'd been nice if they dropped that and talk about a revolt taking place if people had to actually write a check for the amount they owed the government every year. You know, instead of having $50 a week taken out, you write that check for $2,500 at the end of the year, and then you hear Bernie Sanders saying, "I'm going to raise your taxes and give you free college." You know, even college kids could see through that. All right. So anyway, we're stuck with that still. But anyway, income taxes were raised. War bonds were sold. People loaning money to the government, essentially, and buying a bond. All right, so we had to pay for it. All right, the last section here, I have this under America preparing for the war. It doesn't really fit there, but I've got to talk about it someplace. Some of the weapons of this war. All right, radio. You might not think of radio communications as a weapon, but it made battles on a scale that was unimagined before possible, because you could communicate across these vast distances very quickly. There's, I think it's the Coral Sea battle, if I remember right, in the Pacific, where the two fleets never caught sight of each other. It was all planes flying back and forth and radio communication. That it wouldn't have been possible without radio. So radio was a significant improvement. Airplanes became a major weapon. The First World War, they were a novelty. We have, the Red Baron and Snoopy on his doghouse, and that type of glamorous thing. But here they become a major military weapon, major weapon. So, radar. Radar was developed in 1940, just as the Germans are invading England. Right? And it did give them a tremendous advantage to have some advance warning that the Germans were coming. Radar. The next thing is the average typical soldier had a whole bunch of new weapons at his disposal. We talked about machine guns already. We have improvements in machine guns, them being made smaller, more portable. Grenade launchers, nice little things like flamethrowers. Tanks, major improvement in tanks. They were just developing at the end of World War I. We have major improvements here. So there's a whole wave of things there for the typical soldier to use. All right, and then we got to talk about the big one. In 1945, the atomic bomb being developed. That's a whole nother multi-class period discussion to all the different facets of the atomic bomb and the research and development and all of that, but atomic bomb. All right, America's preparation for the war. Let's get the war in Europe done, and then we'll pick up the war in the Pacific next time. So the next point here is the end of the war in Europe. The end of the war in Europe. All right, we left this thing with Germany running rampant around Europe, having cleared the mainland part of Europe and headed into the Soviet Union. Germany dominating the continent of Europe. What happens here, I've got 2 points here. The first one is the three main fronts open up. There's three main attacks on Germany that open up. We'll look at the three of them separately, and then we'll talk about the German collapse and surrender. All right, so the Germans, they launch all of these attacks, and then we begin to turn things around. Let's look at those three fronts. The three fronts. The first one is the eastern side, the Germans versus the Soviets. The attack there was the summer to fall of 41, starting in 42, mostly. The Soviets stopped the German advance and then began pushing the Germans back. There's some extremely nasty, ugly fighting that takes place there. The Germans go into the north part first and fail, and then the next year, towards the end of 42, they go into the southern parts down around the Black Sea and through that area and end up at Stalingrad. It's hard to talk about it, but lots of people look at Stalingrad as the turning point of the war. There, an entire German army surrenders. If you can imagine, it's not just that they got lost and pulled back, they surrendered. All right, the Soviets completely encircle them and they're captured. But that was at Stalingrad, and they get stopped and then slowly push them back. The German commander at Stalingrad was a guy named Paulus. And I forget the ranks involved here, but at one point he radioed back that he wanted to surrender. He was surrounded, running out of ammunition. There's still like 56,000 of them or something. He wanted to surrender. And Hitler's response was to promote him and say, nobody of that rank has ever surrendered in the history of Germany. Don't be the first. We're going to fight to that. Eventually they just run out of ammunition and they get completely captured. Most of them die in the luxury accommodations that the Soviets provide for them. Few of them make it back to Germany. Most of them, this is the end of the road. So, all right, so we have that front there. Stalingrad is the turning point, and you can see these two arrows here. The Soviets pushing them back slowly over the next several years, pushing, driving them back. So that's the one front, the eastern side. The second front is to the south. the Allies pushed the Germans out of Africa and then pushed them up north through Italy and on that way, out of the south. If you want some dates here, it's May the 12th of 43 that the last German stronghold in Africa was taken. Okay, again, it was the fall of 42 that we have things turn around on the Eastern Front. Here, the spring of the next year, the Allies pushed the Germans, the Axis forces, out of Africa. This is May the 12th. If you want the date down here, you can see Tunis. I had a chance to go to Tunis. It's a dry, dusty, rundown city, but there's an American cemetery there where our soldiers are buried. That, you know, it's just think of desert with cities, with half-built buildings run down, and then this green golf course with nice trees, gravestones. It was pristine in the middle of this very ugly-looking city. But anyway, that was at Tunis. We have a cemetery there. But it was May of 43. We pushed through there and pushed the Allies out. Let me give you a name to associate with that at least. Eisenhower is the man responsible for that. He has a compadre with him, George S. Patton, who is famous in his own right. All right, so it's May of 43 that they drive them out of Africa. The next stage is Italy, and it was September of 43 that the landings take place in Italy. You can see up here at Salerno Beach. I also had a chance to be close to there. I went to Pompeii instead of to the landing zone, so I didn't see them. But anyway, the fall of that year, they began attacking Italy, and if you want a further date, June the 4th of 44, Rome is taken. All right, so we have the Soviets here pushing from this side, pushing in. We have the Allied forces in Africa pushing the Germans out and now funneling them up through Italy, up that direction. And then we have a third front that materializes at D-Day. All right, June the 6th of 44, we make the landings at Normandy. And that really just does not do justice to that, to say we make the landings. Right? This was a massive operation. Right? There's a reason why the Germans never pulled off going the other direction. This was not easy. We had to get enough troops landed to be able to fend off the German attacks. We had to get enough equipment landed with them so that they needed tanks, they needed ammunition, they needed food, enough equipment landed. We had to get enough fuel there to keep the tanks running. Imagine how useful a tank is when it runs out of fuel. And all of those things were major operations. There was an operation that I like the name. It was called Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. And it's just what it sounds like. They laid a pipeline from England across to Normandy. They had it all staged, the pipeline in these gigantic coils, and it was within hours of the guys landing. They had this pipeline dropped and ready to dispense fuel on the beachhead. So this is, to say they landed really doesn't do this thing justice.
Have you seen the pictures of them sending these huge barges of concrete to make an artificial harbor?
Yeah, the Mulberry Harbors. Yeah, even that. How do you land tanks from a boat? Or just drive them off to the edge, and you had to get them to the coast. So they made harbors, and it was a major operation, and we pull it off. So anyway, June the 6th, 44. The Germans were expecting this. They knew an attack was coming. There's all kinds of espionage and counterintelligence and misinformation being spread. They didn't think we would attack on that particular day. They didn't know where exactly, but the conditions weren't perfect. The oceans were kind of rough. It was overcast, but we went ahead and launched anyway. We did catch them a little bit off guard. But anyway, June the 6th, we land. We pull it off. We establish this beachhead there at Normandy, and begin pushing in. So we can see this drive in this way. So at that point, we have all three of these fronts here driving in on the Germans, pushing them into surrender. So, all right, before we get to the actual surrender, we've got to talk about the Battle of Bulge. I have this underneath that western front. This takes place in December of 44. June of 44 was the D-Day landings. By this point, We have the forces out of Italy driving fast up into Germany, the forces out of the Soviet Union driving close, things are beginning to close in here. And Hitler realizes what's happening. He might have been insane, but he wasn't stupid, or might have been stupid but not insane. It was some version of that. He knew that what was coming. So he made this last attempt to break out of this thing, and that's the Battle of the Bulge, December of 44. Down towards France, where it's on the map there, an attempt to break through these three pincers that are coming in at them. And it fails. The pivotal battle was a place called Bastogne in Belgium, where some American troops held their ground again. They're outnumbered about 10-1, and they hold on long enough for others to come and help them. But Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's attempt to break out of this thing, and it fails. Oh well. Read some books. There's some really good books. All right, so that's the three fronts. That's my first point. Those three fronts open up and they drive in on Germany. The next thing is VE Day, the surrender of Germany. We haven't even had a chance to talk about the Bitburg beer plant. When Patton's forces came through the area, he gave very clear instructions to not destroy the beer plant. Save it. He was thirsty. So there's all kinds of great stories like that. Is it great to save the beer? Okay, forget it. All right, the surrender of Germany, VE Day. All right, the end comes on May the 7th of 45, when Germany surrenders. Hitler committed suicide, according to some people, on April the 30th. Google, anyway. There's some people that think he lived in a national park out in the western part of the United States. Are you one of them? Have you seen the picture? They go to this lodge in one of our national parks, and there's a room that's got Nazi insignia in it, and they take these grainy photos and blow them way up. If you've ever tried to zoom into a picture on your computer that's not very high resolution, you end up with nothing. But they blow it up anyway and say, look, that's his head right there. They have, you can see an ear, and they say, oh, that's Hitler's ear, we can tell. Anyway, so there's some really, really weird conspiracies. I think he died right here. Committed suicide on the 30th, and then Germany surrenders on the 7th. And then May the 8th is Victory, VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. And that's the end of the fighting there. We have the whole other side of the world to talk about, but we will do that next time. If you ever don't feel like studying, Google conspiracy theory sometime on YouTube, or YouTube it. That wouldn't be Googling it. And you can waste a lot of time. You're dismissed.